There's no doubt the flashiest part of our fantasy teams are the wide receivers. Whether if you get them in the early rounds or you find some late round gems, these are guys that can single-handedly win you your fantasy leagues. So today I'm going to go through my current top 20 going in to this fantasy draft season. Now, as always, drop a comment down below. Let me know who you're higher on or lower on than where I have them in today's video. And if you're new around here, we do tier rankings because, well, you may prefer one over the other and vice versa. But let's stop yapping. Let's get into it. The elite can't miss wide receivers in this year's draft are as follows. We have Ja'Marr Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, and Justin Jefferson. All of these guys have had questions, but all of these guys going into next season, as long as they stay healthy, can be the wide receiver one. They are in great situations as far as passing offenses. They are going to put up a ton of points. The only downside to them, you have to pay a premium price. You have to draft them in the first round. But after that, these are guys that single-handedly can carry your fantasy lineups with all the injuries and chaos that fantasy has. Now, tail end of the first round and going into the second round, these are the wide receivers that you're going to be looking at. Nico Collins, Malik Nabers, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas Jr., and Drake London. For Nico Collins, he was on pace to be by far and away the #1 wide receiver in fantasy last season. He was on pace for 2,000 yards before his injury. So Nico Collins, again, going into a situation where there's nothing but young weapons around him until Tank Dell returns. So CJ Stroud might just force feed him the ball 15 times a game. Outside of that, these are all guys that get great target volume. They're a little bit more, they have a little bit more question marks than the guys before that I mentioned, because they might just be double teamed every single play, if I'm being honest with you. But all of these guys can carry your fantasy lineups if you decide to go running back in the first round. But I do want to dive into Drake London, because this is a guy that had to deal with two different quarterbacks and really a very underwhelming offense last season, but he still produced. He was still a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. As you see in the bottom right of your screen, he checks all the boxes for me. I think going into this year with Michael Penix, from what we've seen, they're going to pass the ball a lot more than what they did with Kirk Cousins. And this is a guy that had great target share. He doesn't really have any target competition around him at all, really. He's going to be used heavily in the red zone. This is an offense I do think will make a playoff push. I'm not going to say they make it, but they're going to be relevant. And Drake London in this exact offense with this quarterback has produced at a top 10 level. So Drake London checks all the boxes, and I think he's going under the radar. Now, the next tier of guys are guys that if you decide to go other positions early, let's say you want to go with Brock Bowers or a star running back in the first 2 rounds, you could potentially grab some of these guys at the end of the second or even in the third round of your fantasy drafts. Ladd McConkey, Rashee Rice, JSN, 3 tremendous slot wide receivers that just get open almost every single play for the quarterbacks, and that's why they have so much reception volume and upside. But on the flip side, you have guys like A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill, veterans. You know what you're getting out of them. Now, they don't have the highest of ceilings, but these are guys that have shown you they are very reliable in fantasy football. So if you take a shot on, let's say you get Ashton Jeanty in the first round and you want a little bit more stability, you can get A.J. Brown because, well, his production is almost guaranteed. But I do want to dive into Rashee Rice here, a guy that last year had a pretty horrific injury there in the middle of it to his knee, but he's already back, he's already ready to go, and he's going to get back to 100% of his snaps at the start of next season. Now, if you remember at the beginning of last year, he was on pace to be a top 3 fantasy wide receiver. He was getting that much volume and production with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, of course, in this Kansas City offense. This is a guy that does have a decent amount of target competition, but Travis Kelce's getting older. I don't think he's going to be used nearly as much. You do have Xavier Worthy around him, but ultimately, we saw that when Rashee Rice was healthy, he was the guy in this offense. But outside of that, the Chiefs are looking to bounce back, get back to the top of the mountain, and Rashee's going to have to be a huge part of that. Now, some high-end wide receiver twos, these guys can range depending on where you're drafting and if you're in a home league or not. Some might go earlier or later than others. But T. Higgins, Marvin Harrison Jr., Khalil Shakir, who is going under the radar yet again, Brandon Ayuk coming off an injury, don't forget about him, Garrett Wilson, and the Mr. All Reliable Mike Evans. You see all these guys, they're all going to be in offenses that are going to either heavily utilize them, or they're just in great offenses that provide a lot of opportunities for scoring the football. But for Mike Evans at the bottom, I do want to throw it out there that if he gets one more 1,000-yard season, he will break Jerry Rice's record and the NFL record as far as having the most consistent 1,000-yard seasons. So Mike Evans, even though he's older, he's probably doesn't have the highest of upside. You can guarantee yourself at least 1,001 yards this season because Baker's going to get that out of Mike Evans. But I do want to talk about a guy that has seemingly gained 30 pounds of muscle in one off season in Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy that let us down last year as far as those who believed in him and this Arizona offense. But this is a guy in Marvin Harrison that he's so naturally gifted and talented that I have no doubt that he will produce to a way higher degree this season. There is really no targeting competition in this offense outside of Trey McBride and occasionally James Conner, but Kyler Murray's out to prove himself. I think Kyler's playing for his job in Arizona. And Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, I think they're in line for a huge season because this is a team that has an easy schedule, maybe the easiest in football. And I'm serious when I say that for all people involved. The Cardinals, in my opinion, will either make the playoffs or be right outside. And if that is the case, Marvin Harrison is going to be a huge part of why they do that. But that's going to do it. My top 20 wide receivers at this point in time going into the 2025 fantasy football season. Again, let me know your predictions in the comments section below. But until next time, get out of here.